now. And then
Hey, clean up that language.
I'm going to share my screen. If I can find the Photoshop, there it is. And then I'm going to, let's see, participants. I'm going to mute everybody.
Oh.
Sorry. Okay. So I'm going to open the chat here. And if you have anything you want to say, any questions or any issues or anything, just stick it in the chat. But I'm okay also if you just want to chime in, just unmute yourself and ask a question or whatever. And if once you ask a question, if you wouldn't mind unmuting yourself so that we don't spill over and everybody's stepping on each other, that'd be great. So just a little disclaimer, as I mentioned a minute ago, I'm a little Zoom challenged right now, but I think it's, as far as what we're going to use it for, it's going to be just fine. Basically just show and tell, a little bit of screen sharing and that sort of thing. When we get into the area where I'm asking you to try it yourself, then there is the ability there that if you get stuck or whatever, you can share your screen and we'll take a look at it and see if we can figure out what's going on there. That's the big issue. The biggest issue with me that we're not able to do as a classroom is that I typically will give you the opportunity to try it yourself, and then whenever you're doing that, I walk around and try to see if there's any issues, and there usually are, and it's pretty easy to just stand beside you and tell you what to do to fix that. So we just had somebody else come in, I believe, but anyway, what we're going to do tonight is we're going to start first with smart objects, and we're going to talk about, we talked about this a few weeks ago, or a few months ago, I mean, a couple of months ago, I think it was in February, where I just kind of introduced you to smart objects. And what we're going to do tonight is I'm going to talk a little bit more in depth about smart objects. And anytime I'm talking to you about a workflow type thing like this, like smart objects is, probably I'm going to go a little bit fast and kind of go through it and explain it as I go, and then not necessarily ask you to do it yourself because it's a workflow thing. And if you get confused or if you have questions, I will certainly answer questions and whatever, but I don't think I'm going to take 15 minutes for you to try it on your own. Smart objects is something is basically workflow. You don't actually go in and do any editing or anything, and you can either use them or not use them. I just watched a video the other day by Glenn Dewis. I don't know if you know him, but he's a very, very accomplished photographer and compositor. And right off the bat in his tutorial, he says, "I don't do smart objects." So I mean, even big name photographers don't do smart objects. So it's not something that is right for everybody. But I think you do at least need to know about it. So let's start here, and I've got this image here that I took in New Braunfels several years ago when I went to visit my sister. And as I have said many times, I recommend that you bring it in as a smart object because that gives you the ability to go back into the raw file and make any adjustments. Now, if you come into, excuse me, if you come into Photoshop through Lightroom, and you double click on this, it's still going to take you back to Camera Raw. It's not going to take you back to Lightroom, but the sliders are the same. The only difference is the way that they're presented. So if you double click on this file here, it opens up the Camera Raw, and you're able to come in here, and here's all the sliders and changes that I've made to this file. You can come in, change those, add different things. For you Lightroom people, up here at the top, you have this toolbar that has your tools. This is where your adjustment brush is, your spot healing tool, and those sorts of things, your crop tool, and so on. Over here on the right-hand side, is where, let me just zoom in here a little bit, see if I can remember how to do this. Nope, this key, there we go. Over here, you've got, these are the tabs. These are the same thing as your panels in Lightroom. So this is your basic panel. This is your tone curve and your detail and so on. Here's your HSL adjustment. So all of that is over here. So you have exactly the same sort of thing. It's just laid out differently. So if you were to come in from Lightroom, these would be the adjustments that you made in Lightroom. You're sharing the same XMP file that was created in Lightroom. You're sharing it over here. So I just want to point that out. So if I take this layer and I duplicate it, and there's like 4 different ways to duplicate this layer. My favorite is just Command or Control J does the duplication, but you could also right click here and come up here at the top and it says duplicate layer. You could also click on this flyout panel, come up here, it says duplicate layer. You could also come over here to your layer menu item and it says duplicate layer. So any one of these methods, but my favorite is just Command J to duplicate the layer. Now when you do that, you're actually copying the exact same thing. Now I said this before and I meant to mention this a few minutes ago, but a smart object is nothing more than a container. It contains information. It's not a pixel-based layer. It contains information. So it contains all the instructions that you had that you did whenever you were in Camera Raw or in Lightroom. So all those sliders, it contains all those instructions. It's kind of like a raw file where it contains all of your information. It doesn't, so you have instructions. So whenever you make a change, you can actually change. It's non-destructive basically. So if I duplicate this container up here with this container, when I double click on it, you're going to see the exact same values in here. Okay, so if I come in here and I add vibrance up to, way out of sight here, and I say okay, you come down here and double click, and that slider is down here as well. So they share the same XMP file when you do it that way. So when you copy a smart object, that's what you get. They're going to share the same container information. So what if you didn't want that? Well, if you don't want that, you want to copy this and you want a smart object, but you don't want all of that information to be shared between the two. Let's throw this away, and there's a couple ways you can do that. What you can do is you can do Command J, and then you can right click and say I want to rasterize that layer. When you rasterize a smart object, that means you're baking that information in. You can no longer change it. So if I rasterize this, now it's not a smart object anymore. It is a destructive layer. You cannot go back and make these changes. If I right click then and create it as a smart object, take just a second here to create the smart object. Then if I double click on it, you'll notice that it has actually created another file here. So in this other file, you have a flat layer that you can make adjustments to. So this is, it's a little different, and I'll expand on that in just a minute. This is one way to create another smart object. So that's a copy. The other way is to come in here and right click and do new smart object via copy. If I click on that, it creates an exact duplicate of that, except they don't share XMP file. So if I double click on this and come in here and hit that vibrance again and say okay, and then double click on this one, vibrance is not affected. So they don't share the same XMP file, but they do share, or you do get the base, the image with all of the original sliders in here. So now let's say, so that's important, and I just wanted to point out that particular thing. Anytime you copy a smart object by doing a duplicate, you're going to copy everything that's inside that smart object. So now let's say that I wanted to do a curves layer, and we're just going to add some stuff here, some adjustments. Let's say now I want to do a hue and saturation layer, and I want to bring the saturation down a little bit. Let's say I want to do a black and white filter adjustment, and I want to bring the reds down, the yellows way up, greens down, whatever, blues, and then I'm going to change it to soft light. Now I'm going to come in here and I go, wow, that's way too dark. So I'm going to take this and I'm going to lighten it back up. So I have something like this. Let's just say this is cool. This is what I want, and I want to apply a filter to it. Well, I can highlight all of these layers, and I can do right click and create smart object. What it's going to do is it's going to create a smart object with all of these layers inside it. And that's extremely powerful, because you're going to always maintain the ability to double click on this, and it's going to open another file with those changes in there. So let's say I wanted to add a lookup table, and I could come in here and add a lookup, do foggy night, bring it down to 20%, and save it. And once you save it, it's saving right now, and close it, that adjustment will be brought back to the original file. It's a little bit slow getting going here. There we go. So now I close it, and now I'm back to the original file. And if you look up here in the history, it says update smart object. So if I go back before the update, that's the way it looks, and this is the way it looks now with that change in there. So you're able to go back and add filters inside there, adjustment layers inside there, and change those adjustment layers as well. But you're also able to, right here, add a filter. So we're going to add a filter, and we're going to use Luminar. I don't know if any of you own Luminar, but it's a really cool program. I still do 90% of my stuff in Photoshop. I do very little in these other plugins. Let's see, let me click here. There we go. So we're lightening it up. So I'm just going to do that one thing and apply it. And it's going to go back, and it's going to apply this information eventually. I think it's saving here. And it's going to go back into, here we go, Photoshop, and it's going to add that filter in here. And you see it's down here at the bottom. So now I have not only in this smart object, not only those adjustment layers, but I also have this filter applied to those adjustment layers. But let's say I think, well, okay, I like that, but I want to go back again and change one of those adjustments. So now I'm back in here where the color lookup is and the hue and saturation. Maybe I want to take this hue and saturation, and I want to make sure that the greens in here are pretty saturated. So I can push this up, and then I can save it again. And what it's going to do is it's going to go back into the original file. It's going to open up Luminar again, and it's going to apply that adjustment to the smart object that has the adjustment I just made in this hue and saturation. So it allows you to work fairly non-destructively. So it's opening Luminar now, and you're tempted here to go in and tell it to apply, but you don't have to touch anything. It's going to do it all on its own. So it's looking in here and saying, okay, I chose this first preset. I'm going to take that now and go back into Photoshop, which is where we are now. And all I have to do is close this, and that changes in here. So again, I have update the smart object. I can click here, and you should be able to see more saturated greens, and you can just barely see it there. But so that what that tells you is that you can add filters, and you can go back and adjust those adjustments, and the filter will be applied on top of those adjustments. But we can take it even further. What if I don't like quite what the Luminar filter is? I can just double click on it here and open Luminar back up again and make a change. So it comes back over here. I can take this, say I don't like it at 100%. I can take it down to say 80% and then apply it. And then it will take it back into Photoshop again with that change. So again, non-destructive. You can go back and you can adjust the adjustment layers. You can go back and adjust the filter itself, but there's more. What if I like this, but it's just a little bit more than I want? I can double click this little icon right here. And once again, it's going to go back into Luminar right quick to grab the information because I'm working on a filter, an external filter. It's going to go back and get the information, and then it's going to come back into Photoshop eventually. And then it's going to open this little box up here at the top. And this right here allows me to change the opacity of that filter. So I click here and it allows me to bring the opacity down. Let's say I want to take it down to say 65%. And I want to apply a screen filter or screen blending mode to it. So you can do those things as well. And here's, you can preview it, or you can, I always leave it on preview. But you hit OK. And now we've got all of these things that we've done. So with this, with smart objects, you can do all of this non-destructively. So that is 95% of what I wanted to show you on smart objects. Do I have any questions at this time? I guess that's a no.
No, I have a question because I've been, playing around, I pick up probably 5% of what you teach us. But I know playing around with some of the photos when I've been just trying to do some of the stuff, and it'll say, well, you can't do this because basically I figured out, okay, it's a smart object. It needs to be rasterized, or no, it's rasterized. You need to change it. Can you explain it, or maybe it just happens to me. I don't know, but can you kind of explain more about the difference between a smart object specifically and rasterize? I assume, it sounds like a smart object, the XMP stuff is there and you say it's non-destructive, but the rasterized, or why does sometimes it won't let me do something unless it's rasterized?
Okay. Well, you were exactly right. This smart filter here it's just a container. So since it's a smart filter, you can't do any pixel pushing on it at all. You can't do any cloning. You can't do anything like that. So you can't do anything that changes the pixels in the image. But if you double click on this and you go over here to this image, you can come in here and add a blank layer, and then you can do pixel pushing on that. And what you can do is come over here if you wanted to do like if you wanted to do like the healing brush or something. Excuse me. All you have to do now, guys, I'm sorry, I've got the tools up here at the top for Zoom that are in my way. So I'm going to have to pull this down a little bit so I can see. You have this menu at the top, and all you have to do is make sure that the sampling you're doing is not just the current layer. So in this case, I would want to do all layers because the information I'm wanting is down here at the bottom in this image. Even though this is a smart object, there is still information there that I can clone from. Or in this case, that I can use the spot healing brush. So I can still come in here with this, and if I wanted to do something like right here, if I wanted to clone something, I could still come in here and do it. So you can see over here, if I zoom in, you can see over here what I've done. So I am doing it on a rasterized layer, but I'm getting my information from down here at the bottom.
Okay, I may not have had all layers selected, and that was why I couldn't clone or do certain things that I
Right.
wanted to do.
Right. So if you, oops, what did I do here? I need to get back. Okay. Yeah. So if you're in a situation like that and you have a smart object, you can and that's one of the reasons why I've been trying to show you to do all your adjustments like that, where you're doing cloning or uh, healing brush, to do it on a blank layer, because then you don't have to worry about that this is a smart object down here or something. As
Okay.
long as you tell it to sample from all layers or sample from current and below, or as long as you pay attention to this up here so that you're getting it from the right place.
Yeah, and I remember you discussing that, but then translating it to when I get home 3 weeks later is not always the best.
Well, it just takes a lot of
It does.
practice.
There's so much to learn on this thing, and it's like I say, if I can pick up 5% of it, I feel like I've done something.
Well, that's another reason why I've tried to do the YouTube videos too. So
Yeah, I go back and I play those and I stop them and I go back and do what I'm trying to do, and then I play it some more and then I back up. So yeah, they've been very useful.
Okay, well, good. I hope that answers your question on there, Chris.
Yes, it does. It explains it a little bit better.
Okay, great.
Okay, Bob.
Yes.
Yeah, okay. I see you put a bunch of adjustment layers on there, and I'm curious, what of that could you not have done on a regular rasterized layer?
What effect could I not have done?
What of those adjustment layers, or is it just that blank layer that you're doing pixel pushing on?
That's the only one that I'm really doing any pixel pushing. I keep saying pixel pushing, because
Right.
but it could be anything over here. Now, one thing I didn't say that I really need to point out is that if you didn't have this layer down here and all you did was create a smart object with your adjustment layers, this is what you would see. So you wouldn't be able to see anything that so if you did a black and white and a hue saturation, you wouldn't be able to see it. So you want to make absolutely sure that you put a layer in here that has a copy of the image.
I'm not sure I was clear. The question was, what of that you did could you not have done with the rasterized layer?
Could I not have done with the rest?
Yeah, if you'd not converted to a smart object, what of that would you not have been able to do?
Oh, so if I go back over to the original image, and what could I not have done over here?
Yeah.
So the alternative would be for me to come in here, and let me just show you that. Maybe I'm hoping that this is what you're asking. Let me move this back up here because I'm lost in icons.
Honestly, I'm trying to look for the value of this.
Okay. Well, that's what I'll do then. So we're going to come in here and do a curves layer. We'll just do all the stuff in here that I did over there.
Just do one or two.
Okay. So then we'll do hue saturation, let's say. Okay. So I'm desaturating it a little bit. And I probably should turn that on. So see, I'm going to have to turn, well, I have this one on, so it should be fine. Okay. So now I've got this. What do I need to do in order to add the filter? I can't just do a filter on one of these adjustment layers. So in order to apply a filter, I have to come in here and create that stamp visible layer, or whatever it's called. I always call it a clone stamp layer, but it's the Command Shift Control E, and it creates a stamp layer of all of these layers, right? So now I can do my filter. So if I go and I do my Luminar filter, which will take a moment for it to open. Okay, so I selected this one. Okay, and then I apply it. I apply it, I think. Sometimes it's a little slow whenever you're working with a third-party filter. Okay, so it's adding the filter. So now I have the filter on here. So now what happens if I say, well, this curve is not what I wanted. I can't just come in here and change this, because if I change this, it doesn't do anything. See, because you have this stamped layer up here at the top. So what you would have to do is come up here and create another curves and try to get where you want it to go. So in other words, you would have to try to maybe lighten it up a little bit or darken it a little bit or whatever. But you can't adjust it by adjusting this curves layer, curves adjustment down here. So you would have to start from scratch. So now also, what happens if I go, oops, I really don't like how I did that layer, or how I did that filter. I mean, I applied too much. You can't go back and change what you did. It's already baked in. You don't have a smart object here. So because you don't have a smart object, the filter has been applied. You can't go back. What you would have to do is turn this off, turn that off, and come in here and do it again, create a new one, and then go do it all over again.
Okay, I think I followed you on that one. You cannot apply a filter adjustment layer to a rasterized layer.
Filter adjustment to, no, that's not, I don't think that's.
Can I try to just help a little bit?
Sure.
Please.
It's what I normally use smart objects for. So let's say I'm going to add a blur or noise or things like that. When you do that, it rasterizes itself after you apply the filter and you move on. But if you do it on a smart object, it's never solid. So you can go back and adjust your noise, or go back and adjust the blur. And it's not always a solid layer that you can't change, because there are times when I blur too much or something, and then I've got to go back now and redo the blur. Well, you don't. If you put it on a smart object in there, you just click on the adjustment part, and you just change the blur directly there and move on.
Yeah, so like I was saying, if it is a smart object, it's a container. Yes. So if you put the filter in that container,
right. But as far as, and I guess maybe as far as trying to convey what I would, so generally I may not do it on like with an adjustment layer unless I'm putting something on top of it. But I would do it on something that's not an adjustment layer, but something that's stacked.
Okay, I just tried it, Bob, and I see it, and I probably didn't say what I meant correctly, properly, but it does exactly what I was thinking.
Okay.
So never mind.
Okay, well, good. That's the point, is for you to understand. So if I didn't explain it well, I'm sorry. But the point really is that a smart object is a container. And if you use it the way I showed you there, that's fine. If you don't use it that way, that's fine too. I mean, I typically don't use it the way I showed you there. I normally do it exactly the way Priscilla was talking about. I normally have my adjustment layers up here, and I will create a smart object specifically for the filter so that I can reuse the filter or change the filter if I need to. But I do think this has some merit that you double click. In fact, when I do my composites, especially with my banners where I have the basketball players or the softball players, I have a particular smart object that I create for each one of the girls, and I go over into the other file and I do all my work that I do on them, and then I bring them back and blend them in. So it allows me that if I decide that I want to make a change, I've got all that information together in a container, and I can go back and I can make a change. So it's pretty convenient, but I can understand, for doing a landscape like this one right here, I probably wouldn't do it that way. But it's just, I just happen to have this one that I wanted to show you how it works. So take it for what it is, and if you decide you might want to do it that way, because it does make it totally non-destructive here doing it this way. It's just a little bit of a different approach, that's all. So there's one more thing that I wanted to show you in regard to smart objects. And let's see, I'm going to come in here and delete some of these layers. All the way down. Okay. So another thing is, if you happen to be adding an element in, and this is probably maybe 0.99% of you that are going to be doing this, but I need to show it to you anyway. If you were to add a bush over here to hide this trash, for example, and you bring it in from another object somewhere, and you wanted to reduce it or whatever, I just need to show you how this works. And I'm going to do it with one of my softball players. And so I'm going to take this girl and I'm going to bring her over. And there's lots of ways that you can bring images over. This is just one of them, the way that I do it. I drag it over. You could also do it, I'm just going to delete her because I'm going to show you the other way too. You could do a Command or Control A for select all, then you could do a Command C for copy, and then you come over here and do a Command V and paste it in. So you could do it either way works. I just got used to dragging it in, so I wanted to show you that. But if I do a free transform and I take her and I make her small, and I'm going to make her really small because I'm going to put her across on the bank over here. Let's come in here where you can see. And she's out here yelling at her dad saying, "Get out of that water, it's dinner time." So, and then I come in here and I'm just going to add a couple of adjustment layers just for grins. We'll do a levels and we're going to clip it to her and we're going to make her a little bit darker here. And we're also going to bring down the saturation some, so she fits in a little better. Now, obviously, I would add some shadow and all that kind of stuff. Excuse me. But what I wanted to show you here, oops, need to clip that too. What I wanted to show you here is, if I can get on the right layer here, I want to move her down just a little bit. There we go. So what I wanted to show you is, and I'm looking at this and I go, I really don't want her over there. I want her over here on this bank. So instead of her being over there, I'm going to drag her over here, and obviously she's way too tiny over here. So I'm going to make her big again. And now, what happened? Look at how blurry and awful she is. The reason for that is that when you bring it down real tiny like I did, and I did that in an exaggeration because I wanted to make sure that you could see this. When you bring it down real tiny like that, you're telling Photoshop, I don't need all those pixels, so I'm going to throw them all away. And so it throws away all those pixels when you bring it down. But then when you stretch it back up, it doesn't have those pixels anymore. So now you've got something that looks like this. So the answer to that is really to come over here, and we're going to bring her in again. And I'm going to do it the way I normally do it. Bring her in again. But this time, oh, she's clipped. That's why. This time, we're going to create a smart object with her. So if I right click over here on the layer, convert to smart object, now she's a smart object. Now if I do this, and you can always tell it's a smart object because it's got this big X in the middle. Now I'm going to bring her down again, real tiny like I had her. Bring her over here. Like that, and then I'm going to bring her back over here and we're going to make her big again. And you've got all the detail there. So the point there is that as a container, as a smart object, it maintains all those pixels because, again, it's just a container. So it's got all that information. It doesn't throw anything away. So if you're ever going to do any resizing of anything that you're going to use in another element, you should make it a smart object. Now, you know, I watch a lot of videos and I see a lot of big time photographers out there, big time compositors, and they don't always do this, but they already know where they're going to put these, and they already know that they're not going to stretch it out again. And if they do, they've got her in another tab over here. All they've got to do is throw this one away and put her in over here. So it's just, you know, a suggestion that if you want to maintain that, and I always create them as smart objects whenever I bring any elements into my composites, but you don't have to, because you can always, if you're going to make it bigger, go grab it again and bring it in. You're just going to have to make sure that if you're 10 layers above here and you decide to change your mind then, that you don't have something that has caused, it's going to cause you an issue. And typically if you do it non-destructive smart objects, you're not going to have that issue anyway. But there's something else I wanted to show you with smart objects. Now I only have 2 smart objects in here, actually 3. And if you look over here in the bottom left, let's see if I can zoom in here. This is the document size. And the one on the right is the size of the file right now. The one on the left is the size if I flatten the file. So it shows you that smart objects take up space. And if you have, you know, 50 layers out there with 20 smart objects, this is going to be into the gigabytes. And I get into that real quick when I'm doing my composites. And I try to go back later and collapse and rasterize those smart objects to reduce the file size, but I don't always get it done. So any questions on that? That's all I wanted to show you on smart objects. There's not any questions, we'll move on. Okay, sounds like we don't have any questions. So let's talk about chromatic aberration. It was requested that we talk about this. So chromatic aberration is really not a Photoshop correction or retouching, but I wanted to talk about it because actually I think, Robin, you're the one that asked about it, but there are different ways that you can attack it. And so I thought that I would show you the way that I understand on how to fix chromatic aberration. So I'm going to share another screen, and this is the Facebook page. Can everybody see that? I hope. This is our learning and feedback page. And if you go to Files and you scroll down here at the bottom and say See More, way back here in March of 2018, I wrote a paper and put it in here on what is chromatic aberration. And if you open that up, it gives you a little bit of an explanation of what it is. This is kind of technical. I just want to mention it. I'm not plugging it or anything necessarily. I think maybe 2 or 3 people read this because it is kind of technical, and most people, most photographers anyway, I don't care what it is. I just want to know how to fix it. But basically your light comes in and your lens, well, your lens in there will bend it and bring it down to a focal point here. And this is just the way that the glass works. But sometimes when it bends, the colors, RGB values or channels will separate and they won't quite hit the focal point directly. And what causes this? And there's, you know, I talk a little bit about in here what causes it. But basically, if you have a cheaper lens, which probably most lenses nowadays, you know, are pretty good lenses, and they probably don't do much of this. But also, if you're shooting into a very contrasty scene, or if you're shooting with a very fast lens and you're wide open, sometimes that will lend to giving you chromatic aberration. But you know, sometimes I want to do that. Sometimes I want to shoot wide open with a 2.8 or 1.4 lens or something like that. Sometimes I want to shoot a contrasty scene. So the point is basically, how do we fix it? And that's where I'm going to go next. And so I'm going to share another screen, and we're going to look at, if I can find it here, we're going to look at Lightroom. I'm not a Lightroom user, but I used to be. And what we have here are some images that I shot in South Dakota at Ellsworth Air Force Base. I believe it's the Air Force Base. And if you look at these, I'm going to go to a 3:1 here. there is a little bit of chromatic aberration. You don't see it on this one very much. I'm wondering if I fixed it. I did. Let me turn that off. Okay. This is the image as it came out of the camera. Now you can see it, and I don't know if you can actually see the halo here. This is a blue-green halo here. You have a kind of an orange halo here and an orange one here. One of the things about preparing for these workshops is finding files I can use. And for the most part, I always correct my chromatic aberration. So it's hard for me to go back and try to figure out where these files are unless I go look at a lot of raw files. And I just happen to remember these. And these were shot, gosh, 8 years ago, something like that. And I just happen to remember that I had trouble with chromatic aberration on these. But if you look around the edges here, you're going to see here's some orange right here, some more orange over here, some blue right there, some green right here, some purple here. So you got quite a bit, some green right there all around here. So the first step in fixing all of this, and if you can't see this, let me know, because it's pretty obvious to me, but in preparing for this, I went and shared with my wife's PC, and I looked at it, and I can barely see any of this. But it's pretty obvious on my screen. The first step is to go to the lens correction panel over here and go down in here and click on the remove chromatic aberration. If you click on that, about 95% of the time, it's going to get rid of it. But there's that little 5% of the time, like right here, this orange is still here. Orange is still here. Now, by the way, I'm also going to click the enable profile correction, because that is going to correct any kind of distortion due to your wide angle. And this was shot with a 1735 zoom. There's some orange here.
I'm sorry to interrupt.
Sure.
Let's say you click that and there was really none on the image. Would it hurt anything?
And there is none on the image?
Yeah.
Not really. I mean, if
because I do the default clicking that, because I always forget if I don't do default have it in my import.
Right. That was something I was going to suggest to everyone, is to,
okay.
Yeah, when you
I haven't seen any damage that I know of, but I didn't know if it would, you know, if it would do some weirdness, or if it just catch it if it saw it.
No, I don't think that the remove, checking that box is going to affect anything unless there is chromatic aberration, which is going to try to correct. Whenever you do get into problems is when you do it manually and you go overboard. That's going to cause some problems. So whenever I was going to recommend, and what she's talking about, if you guys don't know, is whenever you do an import, you do file, import, and here we go. And you go to the import screen, there's apply during import over here. And if you select that, there is develop settings. And typically it's going to be one of these user presets, because you're going to create it yourself. And you can see that I have ones that I've created here for lens correction. And all that does is click on the chromatic aberration checkbox and on the profile checkbox, so that it does both of those things. So automatically, every time whenever I bring in my images, it's going to try to correct any chromatic aberration. So thanks for bringing that up. I was definitely going to try to remember.
I've often wondered about it, but I guess not wondered enough to really test it.
No, I think it's, I mean, you may find that I'm wrong there, but I don't think so. I think I'm okay with that. Because I mean, like I say, when I use Lightroom, I do that all the time. And now when I use Camera Raw, it's also one of my presets that I set in Camera Raw. So I automatically select it every time. The only difference is I have to do it myself. There's no automatic on import, because you're not importing anything over there. So anyway, if you click on the chromatic aberration, it gets about 95% of it. But like I said, if you move around here, you're going to see some more. There's a little bit of orange right there. And you guys may not be able to see it. I'm not sure. Here's a little bit of orange here. And again, some blue over here and a little bit of purple right there, a little bit of green right here. So what do you do to fix that? So if you go over here to manual, then you can manually come in here and try to fix those. And you have this little eyedropper for defringe, and I don't really have luck with that, but I'm going to show you what's supposed to happen. If you come in here and your eyedropper, you can see it turn purple there. I don't know if you can see that. When your eyedropper turns purple, you click on it. It's supposed to have made an adjustment here, but it didn't get rid of the blue. So if I click again, maybe click again, it's supposed to be more accurate, but I find it a little bit more difficult to do. If I click here, there's no, okay, it's turned purple right there, click. It turns purple right there. So this is the way you're supposed to use this. Can you see the eyedropper changing colors? Because that's whenever you're supposed to click. And if I come in here and it's turning, you see it turn green, click. But you kind of have to go all around it here. Oops. Now, if you click and it's not green, you get that message. Or if it doesn't change colors. Does this make sense to everybody?
Yeah, and what did you click over here on the, you said defringe?
Right here, there's a little, if you click
Oh,
there,
okay,
the
I see,
eyedropper.
yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
you click on that and you go around here like this blue. You see the eyedropper turn purple?
Yeah, I'm just looking over here on the right side.
Okay. Now, I have better luck doing it by myself, but this is supposed to be more accurate. To me, it takes a little bit longer. But what I like to do, let me put these back where they were. This is 70, I think. I think this is on 30. Start with, this goes to 0. This is on 40. This is on 60. So this is where you are to start with. Let me move that. Just the one right there. Okay, so if I want to get rid of this blue, you've got two areas over here that are blue. You got this little bit of blue right here, which is really more like magenta, I think. And then you are, sorry, cyan. And you got this right here that's kind of blue. So there's a couple of ways to do this. What I typically will do is I'll move this to like 5, something like that. And since this is blue, I'll move the blue down until that blue goes away. See, it's gone. So I didn't have to do anything else to the blue. So now the blue down here is also gone. So now I've got this green over here. Well, green's down here, so I'm going to move this over to about 5. And then I'm going to take one of these. If that didn't get rid of it, which it almost did, I've got a little bit of orange there too. So I'm going to take this orange and move it down. And it didn't really get rid of it. So I'm going to move it back. And I'm going to take this orange and move it. And there, that got rid of it. See, it's gone right there. So now I don't have any blue here. I don't have any orange here. I do have a little bit of blue-green up here. So I'm going to take this blue and push it over, and it's gone. Because you have, this is your green slider, and I've got this blue amount down here. So it got rid of all the green, all the blue and everything, all the orange, with doing it that way, which to me is much more effective than using the eyedropper. So now I just move around and see if there's any other. See, it kind of got rid of all the orange that was in here as well. And I don't see any over here. And I don't see any anywhere else. So basically that got rid of it. Excuse me. That got rid of it by doing the automatic first and then coming in and approaching it manually that way. So let's just do another one. So now here's the second one here. And again, we've got this kind of a blue green right here, and we've got orange. So we're going to start over here. And since this is blue green, it's got a little bit of green. Well, first thing I'm going to do is click here. And this got rid of, that got rid of most of the green, but not all of it. We still have all this orange look down here. So I'm going to go back over here. And the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take this green, because this is kind of a blue green. And I'm going to move that to 5. And if moving these doesn't get rid of it, then I can move that more up to 7 or 8 or something. But since that's a blue-green, just moving that green got rid of all the blue-green right there. So that's not even there anymore. So now we have orange down here. And since I already have the green moved over, I'm going to try this orange down here and see if that, nope, that didn't really do anything. So I'll move it back to about 40 because that's where it started. And I'll take this orange up here and move it over. That didn't get rid of it either. So what I'm going to do, oh, it's because I didn't move this. I need to move this up to 5. Ah, and that got rid of it. So now that I move, so if I move that back, once I moved the top slider, I was able to move this orange and it removed that. Now it's a little bit of a hint down here. So I may go more like to 6 or 7 and there it's gone now. So oops, sorry about that. So making everybody dizzy. So now I'm going to look around and see if there's any other. And there's, but you know, I'm zoomed in here at 300%. So who's going to look at it 300%? The only thing is if you were going to make, you know, a huge poster of this or something, you may as well get rid of everything now. Okay, now here's some blue right here and here's some blue right here. So this is more of a blue green. This is kind of a bluish purple up here. So I'm going to take this blue, I'm going to move it to the left, and it got rid of all of this down here. But I still have this blue-green up here. So I'm going to take this blue where the green is, and I'm going to move it over, and boom, it's gone too.
So does the defringing only work for basically what the screen is seeing and not apply to the entire image?
Yeah, it's to the color that you click on. So let's go to another image here and take a look at that.
Bob.
Yes.
Apparently the reason that you're using Lightroom is that because the dropper doesn't exist in Photoshop?
The dropper does not exist in Photoshop or in Camera Raw, I mean. Yeah, the sliders do.
Yeah, everything's there except for the dropper. And
now the reason I'm doing it in Lightroom is because it's the same thing in Camera Raw, and I just wanted to, most of you are Lightroom users, so I thought it'd be, there's no Photoshop here. It's either Lightroom or Camera Raw. And since most are Lightroom users, I was going to do it over here. But I'm also going to go over to Camera Raw. So, but I wanted to start here. Now this is a little dark, so I'm going to lighten it up a little bit just for grins. Lots of noise there. Maybe some shadows.
Hey, yeah, Bob, before you go farther, on the top of that wing, when you got done taking the blue out of that top of that wing, it left like a white highlight to it. Is that
okay? Let me tell you that yeah, right here.
Right.
That didn't come from the chromatic aberration. That came from my adjustments that I have in here. This is a PSD file, and I mean, like, this is like 10 years ago when I shot this picture, and I was trying to make the sky look really cool, and it wound up putting a halo around it. And the halo is not just here. You got a halo over here as well, and a halo above each one of these a little bit. So it's not a, I mean, I never posted this. It's not a great image, but it had chromatic aberration, and that's what I wanted to show you. So it's come from my other editing. It's not coming from the chromatic aberration.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, good question though. Let's see. Let's go over to Camera Raw and let me show you over there. So I'm going to share my screen again. And okay. So we have this image. If we look, it's got some chromatic aberration around the edge here. So this happens to be a smart object. I brought it in as a smart object. So I'm going to double click here, and it brings me back over to Camera Raw. Now there's no sliders that have been changed here. So I'm not really sure. This is a real old file, so I'm not really sure how I got it as a smart object. But this is the panel for Camera Raw. And again, you have the ability to click that and to change this and then come over. Let's see what it got rid of. Maybe it got rid of everything. That one's not there anymore. This is not here anymore. See if it's, I think Camera Raw works better than, no, I'm just kidding. So let's just take it and turn off this so that we have to manually do this, just for grins, because you're going to need to know probably how to do this manually anyway. It's the same sort of thing. You got yes.
Yeah, it worked marvelously when I just clicked the remove chromatic aberration. It just zapped everything. I'm impressed.
Yeah, it does, 95% of the time for me, it does do that. And so, but you need to know how to do it manually in case it doesn't take, it doesn't do it all. And over in Lightroom, those files, they didn't get rid of everything. I'm not saying that's better over here in Camera Raw because it's the same engine. So it's just happened to be those particular ones. And this one, it's no different than those others. So if we come in here and do it manually, it's like a blue-green again. So I'm going to use this one down here, move this over to about 5. Got rid of a lot of it, but now if we just take this blue and move it over, it's gone. So you just need to know kind of an approach. This is a purplish blue area down here. So I'm going to use the purple. I'm going to go over to 5. And then I'm going to take this blue and I'm going to pull it back, and now that's gone. So it's the same approach. This is kind of an orangey red here. So I'm going to try this because this is more of a red color, purplish color. And I'm going to move this to the right and see. There you go. That got rid of it, all of it right there. So now that's gone. So just go around and see. And the thing you have to be careful of is if you go overboard, you go crazy with these sliders over here, it's not only going to take it away from the edge, but it's going to go into your image, and that color that you're adjusting with so broadly is going to be haloed on the other side because you've gone too far. So you just have to be careful whenever you're doing that. So that's kind of how you would do it in Camera Raw. But I want to show you this image. There is no smart object. You make sure it's actually got some, it does have a little bit right there. Yeah. So there is no smart object. So what do? Well, it just so happens that in Photoshop, you can still go to the Camera Raw filter, but it's like a filter, which means that it's not the same kind of power. It's got a lot of the same functions, but it doesn't have the same kind of power. So if you go to your lens correction, there is no remove chromatic aberration, and there is no adjust for profile. So you have to do it manually. And I wanted to be sure and point that out, that if you happen to go into Photoshop and you haven't corrected your chromatic aberration and you don't go in as a smart object, then you're going to, you still have the tool here to correct it, but you don't have the checkbox to do it automatically. So you have to do it manually. So another reason to bring your images in as a smart object. Because then if you happen to have missed it, maybe it's in an area where you weren't editing too much and you happen to notice it. Once you get over into Photoshop, you're going to have that problem. So again, here, you would come in here, basically we'll look at the orange. And again, you have the orange, and I think it's kind of a green-based orange. So I'm going to move this up to 5 and move this back and see if that fixes it. No, doesn't fix it. So I have to do it up here and then move this over, and that will probably make it go away. Yeah, there you go. So now it's gone here. Move this down here. So you just have to, once you understand a little bit about how to use these sliders over here, then you should never have to worry about chromatic aberration again. Now, if for some reason you can't get those sliders to work for you, it's not a total loss. It almost is, but it's not a total loss. What you can also do, which I don't recommend, but if you're stuck where you don't have another option, what you could do is do a hue saturation. For this instance, I would go to the blues. I would bring the saturation way down, and then I would invert the layer so that you have to paint it in. See all the trouble you have to go to? So then I would come in here and paint over this blue right here. Oops, paint with white. Over this blue here to remove it. And it's not getting 100% of it, so I probably would want to go even stronger and maybe do it. It's not going to, whoa. It's not going to do it. Okay. So even this doesn't quite get it with the hue saturation doing it on blue. Did I have it on blue? Yeah, there we go. Because you're desaturating it. So another thing you could do is just do on master and desaturate and bring it down. In this case, it would work on master because you don't have anything behind it that's going to be really affected. Because this is kind of a gray back here, and this is kind of a gray. So you can remove it this way, and it should work fine.
Even on those colors, if it's green, if you go to green and use that little eyedropper, it'll narrow it down to what the eyedropper is.
Right. Yeah, you could do that too.
And then it might desaturate most of it.
Right. So what she's saying is use this. Select this and come in here and select the color, and it will zero in on the color that you're using. And then you could actually even narrow it down. Say, I just want these particular colors to be selected so it's really blue. Now I've already gone over it, so it's not going to do anything here, but that's kind of what you're talking about, to select the particular color.
Usually I swing, like if I go to blue or green, I swing it all the way over to where it's really outrageous color. And then I click where the most is, and then I can move it back down.
Okay.
But it's easier to select that way if you originally, the very top one, move it all the way to the left.
Okay, so anyway, that is chromatic aberration. I was going to give you some time to work on these. It sounds like that you were kind of doing it as we were going. Do any of you want to take some time? And one thing I didn't mention in the beginning is that out on the Facebook group page, the Photoshop Learning page, I put some links out there for the files that I'm working on so that you can download them and work on them and kind of try to recreate what I've done. And so if you haven't downloaded those, you can anytime. And a lot of you like to do that as the files to work on, to kind of follow what I'm doing. So I don't know, do you want to do that right now? Spend about 10 minutes doing that. If we do that, we're probably not going to have time for luminosity mask, but we can do that next time. So anybody want to do that and take about 10 minutes to work on those files and try to do this and have any more questions or anything? Or do you want to watch the recording and try to do it at that time? Any comments?
I'd rather move on to luminosity. The only comment I have about this is, now I don't typically blow my photos up to this degree and check for chromatic aberration,
Right.
Other than when I was doing my little test about filters. Where I see mine mostly is in leaves. leaves
Okay.
and trees against the blue sky. And I'll go in and do the lens correction and the chromatic aberration. I never can tell anything that it does. So are leaves different than something like this? I mean, is there something specific about leaves that makes it really more difficult?
No, I don't think so. And actually, I intended to mention that that's one common area where you have issues, because you have a bright sky and then you have the darkness of this side, the side towards you, that's shaded from that bright sky. So you've got a really bright highlight and a very dim shadow. And that's usually where you're going to see your chromatic aberration.
Yeah, like I say, I don't typically blow mine up to that degree to notice it, but I mean, just leaves sometimes, depending on the situation, it's like, whoa, they're purple. And I've seen a lot of people on that back roads of Texas lately for some reason. It's like they got these purple trees, and it's like, no, those are green leaves. They're not purple. So
yeah.
so I usually have to go in there and manually adjust, and I probably haven't. I've been just kind of like, just throw the whole thing. I adjust it all the way, and okay, it's gone away, and I'm happy. But I don't blow my photos up and print them a lot. So
Okay. Well, try doing the manual, do it by clicking on the checkbox. And then if it doesn't get rid of the purple, go in there and move that purple slider over.
Yeah, that's what I usually have done, and it does it. But, I say, I don't blow it up to the degree you did here, where you can really see exactly, on all these edges here.
Well, I wanted to make
sure. I don't either unless I'm printing something large. I don't go to that detail.
Yeah.
Well, I was doing it here, blowing it up so big so that you could be sure and see it.
Yes, it was very obvious. And like I say, I typically, because where I notice it is leaves, and they've always got purple around them. I had not seen like the kind of orangey color and the blue and stuff like that. So it's kind of interesting.
Well, these were good because they have all the different colors. And,
yes.
So you have the ability or the requirement to go in and adjust all three or all the different colors. So it made it pretty obvious. So, all right, well, we're going to move on then to the history panel and the history brush. Okay. Has anybody used the history brush?
Yep.
Is that a yep or a no?
Oh, I'm not muted.
Okay.
I used it a million years ago, and then I never did it again. So,
well,
it must not have helped me much, or I was just fumbling around. I don't.
Well, the history brush is something I really never ever use, and the reason is because I can do pretty much the same thing other ways, using mask and such as that. But we're going to talk about the panel first, and then we'll talk about the history brush. The history panel over here keeps track. There's an entry for everything you do, almost everything. I mean, if anything that you do, if you were to bring down a menu, it doesn't do anything like that. But if you do anything particularly that's going to affect your layers panel, it records it right here. So it allows you, and basically when you do your Command Z or Control Z to back up, it's just going up the ladder here in your history panel. So before we really get into that, I wanted to show you in Preferences, if you go to Photoshop Preferences, and I think for PC it's File Preferences, and you go to Performance, over here in this history states, tells you how many of these are going to be recorded, and how many is up to a maximum that can be in here at any one time. So I've got 200 in here for me, so I could have 200 history states at any one time. Once it reaches 200, it starts deleting the ones at the top and just continues down. So it can actually go up to 1,000, and 1,000 is a lot of history states. But if you do a lot of little bitty things like brush strokes, and I'll show you what I mean. But once you do set your history state, you have to think about how much memory you have, because this takes memory. So if you have a laptop and you have 8 gig of memory, you're probably struggling already with Photoshop. If you have something like 32, 64, maybe 128 gig of memory, then you're able to set this pretty high. And it can be advantageous sometimes to set it pretty high. And I have 64 gig and I only have it at 200, but you also have to think about, if you're going to go back and look for something 200 history states there, you're probably going to have a little bit of trouble finding the exact one you want. So you got a trade-off there. But what I wanted to make sure you understood is I do a lot of little brush strokes. For example, I may want to soften this edge here all the way across, and one of the ways that I can do that is with a mixer brush. And I don't have let me get a rasterizer layer. With the mixer brush, and I can come in here and I just do little strokes coming across here like this, soften this edge. And I can go all the way across, softening this edge. And look what I've got over here in my history panel, mixer brush. I've probably got 20 of them or 30 of them right there. So if you do a lot of that little stuff, you're going to have a lot of entries over here that seem meaningless, because which one of these takes me back to here? I'm not sure. So just wanted you to understand that it's going to do everything that you do over here in the history panel. Any kind of thing that you do to any kind of a layer, anything like that, it's going to be over here. And there's some good things about that, because you can, if you have an identifiable area in the history, you can always just click there and you go back to that particular instance. Now, what happens is if I am here and I want to do something else, like another history stroke, oops, all of a sudden all of those others are gone because they're meaningless now, because you were starting at this point and now you've started at this point. So I hope that makes sense to you. Before we get too far into that, I want to go over the flyout panel. Let me move this away. Every panel has a flyout menu. So if I click on this, it's not doing anything. Why? There we go. If I click on this, these are unique to the history panel. So you have step forward and step back. Basically, step back is your Command Z or Control Z to move you back in the history panel. If I click that, it just moves you up to the next one. And now you're going to have step forward and step back. Step forward, you're moving back down to the history panel. So these are things that you do with keystrokes, or you can do with just by clicking on it. So it's a little bit, I never use these. I'll say it that way. A new snapshot, we'll talk about snapshots in just a minute. I can delete this particular history state. When I delete it, it deletes not just the history state, but anything that it does is deleted as well. You can clear history. If I click this, then all of this goes blank. It goes back to open. I can create a new document. And what that means is if I click on new document, it's going to create another document exactly like this one with all of the layers and everything that I have done up to this point. So if you ever wanted to think you're at a point, or you're at a, you think maybe this is something you may want, you can actually create another document and then come back and continue working on this one, so you have it kind of saved in another document. I don't really ever use that, but it could be useful. History options. This is your options that you want to make, how the history panel works. Automatically create a first snapshot. That's what this is right here. It's a first snapshot. So anytime that history panel is open, or anytime I open a file, it creates a snapshot. Automatically create a snapshot when saving. So if I were to save this now, it would create another snapshot. I don't use that, but you could, so that you're kind of protected. So you have a place in time in your history, so that every time you save, it records that as a snapshot. kind of like in Lightroom, I think, when you do snapshots over there. Nonlinear history. I'm not sure why anybody would want these not to be in historical order, but so I'm not really sure what that's used for, what it's useful for. Maybe it's great. I just don't know how to use it. Show net snapshot, show new snapshot dialog by default. So when you create a new snapshot, it's going to open a dialog box. And I didn't initially have this checked, but I decided to have it checked. You'll see why in just a little bit. Make layer visible changes undoable. That's these little eyeballs here. Do you want to make those undoable? And if you do, it's going to create a history state for each one of those anytime you turn the visibility on and off. It's turned on by default. I'm not sure it's that useful, but I left it on. So you can close tab group. Not sure what that is. I should have looked that up. Close tab group. Oh, it closed my group. That's interesting. So now I've got to come up here and show it again. Okay. So basically it just closed this entire panel and moved this up there. Okay, and then close. So I can close that, and it closed that particular tab. So now I have to come in here and open it again. Whoops, wrong thing. History, not the histogram. Close the histogram. Okay, so that's the panel. Now, a lot of that stuff is right here, or some of it. This is the new document. So if you wanted to create a new document here, I could just click here, and now I've got a new document out here. It's called Mixer Brush, because that was the name, that was the last thing. It says duplicate state. So that's where that file is. I've got all this Zoom stuff up here that's covering up my stuff. So I'm going to go ahead and close that and go back to where we were. But that's just saved a new document. And now, yeah, right here, back to where I was. So this is the snapshot icon. This is the trash can, of course. If you want to throw away one of those, wherever your cursor is, you can just click on the icon there, delete that, and it deletes that. So it's the same thing as the delete that's up here, if you wanted to delete. So let's talk about snapshots. If I click here, I have a snapshot. And in this snapshot, I name it. So I can say after first edits. And then, okay. So now I have a snapshot after first edits. So I can come back to here. But if I can create something new, I can come in here and do a vibrance, for example, and notice everything went away. And make it more vibrant. And then I say, I don't really want that. I want to go back to after first edits. You click on that and it brings you back to after first edits. Now the thing that it didn't do is it didn't give me all the history again. It gave me all of the layers and everything, but I lost all that history that was in there. So you need to keep that in mind. Okay, so let's do a little bit more here. And I'm going to come in here and create some stuff. And I'm going to do a curves layer. And let's just make it a little like that. And I just keep doing the same kind of stuff. Let's do a hue saturation. I don't like the yellows in here. I don't know why I had it so yellow. So we're going to bring the saturation down, something like that. Then I'm going to do a black and white adjustment layer. And we're going to bring those yellows back up. Bring the greens down. And then I'm going to do a lookup table. We're going to do my foggy night one. We're going to make it 20%. And so I have all of this stuff and I'm down here and I go, you know, I'm not sure I like this, but it's kind of cool. So I'm going to create a snapshot. So we're going to say after. So I've got after second edit. So now I've got these two up here. I go, let me try something else. So I'm going to go after first edits again. And sorry, after first edit. So now I'm back to where I was with my layers. Okay. And I look at it and I go, well, I like it except for that doggone yellow. So I'm going to take the yellow down some more. So I have something like this, and I'm good with that. So I'm going to say snapshot. I'm going to say, and you can name this whatever you want to. This is just one way for me to know after third edits. Okay. So now I've got three different snapshots. I've got after the first edits, I've got after the second edits, and I've got after the third edits, and they're all different. Well, let's say that I like this one, but I really want the foreground to look like it did after the first edit. So what am I going to do? You can't just come in here and click on this and start painting with your history brush. Notice that there's no brush there. It's got the little circle with a cross through it. There's two things you have to think about. One thing is you have to have an editable or a pixel-based layer that you're painting on. So you can't really paint on this. You have to paint on a pixel-based layer. So if I just add a blank layer, then I have something I can paint on, but I'm still not there. Still won't let me paint. Well, it turns out that one thing you have to do is you have to create a snapshot that is called with merge layers. So what I would do is go back to the first one and I would create another snapshot. And this time I would change this to say merged layers. And I can say first edits, merge layers, just to identify it. I click OK. So now I can go back. See, I think I was at the third layer. And I'm back at the third layer and I have the snap, or excuse me, I want to go here with the, it's the first, after the first edit, but it's with merged layer. Now I can come over here. Well, I have to add my blank layer back. And now I have a brush that I can use. See how difficult this is? That's why I don't use it. But now I can paint back from the after first edits. And I don't know if you can see that. It's got a little bit of a brownish tone to it there. That's because I'm at 30%. Let's go to 100%. There we go. So you can see I'm painting in from the first layer. You probably wouldn't want it here. So you would probably, now you can see over here, zoom in, you can see on this blank layer what I've painted in. And you can see it's painted in. So if I wanted to take it out, I can't just change the color of the layer of the brush because I'm using a history brush. I have to actually come down here and add a mask and come in here and paint with black on the brush. If I can get back to the vector brush, there we go. So now I could come in here if I wanted to paint with black. Well, doggone it. Why is it painting red? Well, that's strange. So I'm painting with black, painting with a regular brush, painting at 100%. Well, I should be able to paint a mask in here to paint this out. For some reason, it's painting red. I'm not sure why. It's as if I'm on, oh, there we go. Somehow I got on the quick mask. I probably accidentally hit it. Okay, so here we go, paint that out. So that's kind of how you use the history brush. You have to have a pixel-based layer here, and then up here you have to be painting from a snapshot that has a merged layer on it. So is that worth it, or is it better to just be able to come in here and create some mask and mask it off the way that you normally do? That's what I would do. I could come back here and copy that and paste it, you know, copy that area and paste it up here, and then come in there and do a mask on it so that it just brings in what I want. So it's much easier doing that than it would be to do this history brush. So any questions on that?
Moving on.
The big thing, though, I think, is the history panel here. You just need to know that you can create snapshots and you can go back and forth, scroll up and down and go to different states in history. You can look at before and after, and it's really helpful for that.
I can see that because I've been, playing around, and it's like I've been really kind of playing with the different curves layers, the dodging and burning thing.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, well, how do you go back to where, oh, I accidentally went too far on that one. So I can see where this, having to be able to take a snapshot and go back to that point would be helpful. Because it's like, okay, you can go back and look at your history, but okay, where was that in the history that I made that specific change or, painted over that?
Right.
Yeah,
So I think this might be helpful to, okay, well, let me get this, and then that way I only have to go back to this point if I screw it up from here forward.
I can see it beating the dickens out of Control Z, Control Z, Control Z.
Yeah.
Exactly. And if you only have 20 history states or something, you might find that you don't have the ability to go back.
I've got 50, but it's still,
Yeah. But I mean, even then, if you do a bunch of little strokes like I was showing you earlier that take up a lot of your history states, then you don't have the ability may not have the ability to get there. So it's really nice, especially if you find that you've done an adjustment and you're really happy with it, then you can do a snapshot because you're going to go forward with something that maybe it'll be better and maybe it won't.
Hey, Bob.
Yes.
What did Richard Sturdivant do when he used his history brush? Because didn't you show using it a different way without the snapshots?
Yeah, what the way that he uses it, and it's not just him, it's others too, is that you can do dodging and burning with the history brush. And basically what you're doing is you're using the current layer as its own history. So in other words, let's see if I can just create a layer here. Right here. So in other words, what he does at this point is he selects the history here, and then he goes into the history brush and do this. And he changes this to multiply and come in here and change the amount to about 10% or less. And then you can come in here and do a little bit of burning right here, a little bit of burning right here, a little bit of burning down here. Then you can switch it to screen and do some dodging over here. So it's another way, and I think I showed this to our class. One of the other ways to do dodging and burning is using the history brush. But your history is on itself. So it's kind of, because this is blending with its own layer. So you're using a blending brush on top of itself. So you're saying I'm blending this multiply of what I already have to make it darker, if that makes sense. So
Thank you, yeah.
Does that answer? Okay.
So a while ago, you were using the mixer brush, not the history brush, right? Is that
correct?
what
That
I
was
got
just
wrong?
no. I was using the mixer brush just to demonstrate that you could easily have a lot of strokes in here, just like I have right here, which is doing the dodging and burning. A lot of the same thing. I would just use that as an example. Richard taught us that when you have a extraction that you're putting into an image, that if you go around the edges with the mixer brush, it softens those edges so that it blends in better. And that's how I typically use the mixer brush. Are we okay? Anything else?
Thank you.
Sure. Nothing else? Well, I'm going to try to, and typically I would ask if you want to do this on your own for a few minutes, and I'd walk around the room and watch and answer questions. But since we're doing this in a different format, I'm just going to move on, and we're going to come over here and look at some luminosity masking. And this is one of the images from Missouri when we went on the insane trip last year. A couple of you will recognize this. Susan, I know you will. So remember last time when we talked about luminosity mask, I told you that you can go in and create your own channels as you go, but it's easier to use an action. And there are several folks out there that offer free actions for creating those channels for luminosity masking. And one of them is Greg Benz, and that's Greg, G-R-E-G, and Benz, B-E-N-Z as in zebra. And I gave you those actions to download and add to your computer if you wanted to. And I have since uploaded those into my iCloud account for you to download as well. So they're out there with the luminosity, in the luminosity masking folder. So if you need to download that action, you can do that and add it to your arsenal. And what you'll get this folder here that says free luminosity masks, Greg Benz, and you have this one that creates luminosity mask and this one that deletes luminosity mask. And when you click on this and click for the action, and we're going to go over actions somewhere down the road, but if you click on this, it's going to, after a few seconds, create several channels out there for us to use for luminosity masking. So if you come over here and click on channels, you'll notice all of these extra channels here. And I'm going to take this and move it up just for a moment so you can see all of the channels it creates. Now these channels take up room, they take up space on your file. If you look over here, once again, you're going to notice that it's already 1.78 gigabytes and we haven't even done anything. So it really adds some space or some requirements to your file that, oops, gotta learn how to use these keys, that's the reason why you have this delete, because once you're through, before you save it, you want to delete all the luminosity mask. So in doing this and using this, the idea is, what do you want to do over in this image? Well, what I want to do first is I want to enhance the sky. It's just a little bit too bright, a little bit blown out. So what I want to do is bring that sky down a little bit. And so what we're going to look for over here is a channel that really separates these trees from the sky. So if we look, when you click over here, it gives you the luminosity. So you're looking at a black and white image because luminosity goes from pure black to pure white and all the shades of gray in between. So what we're looking for is something that really separates that. Now you could probably use this, but it's probably not the one you really want. So this one looks pretty good. You still have some grays in here. So let's see if the difference between this and, okay, this one is pretty good. This one is what we're probably going to use because you have some really separating shadows here from the highlights. So we're going to take this one, and the way you do it is you command click on the icon here and it gives you the marching ants. And you'll notice that the marching ants are up here in the sky. And you got a little bit right here, but we'll take care of that. So next, you need to click back on RGB channel to get it back to color. And then you're going to come over to layers, and with the marching ants selected, we're going to create a curves adjustment layer. And if you look here and you click on option and the mask here, you'll see what you have. Now what you can do here is, it's just like any other mask. You can come in here and paint out all of this stuff that you don't want affected. So we're not ready to do anything with this house or this butane tank or this water. We're just looking at the sky. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to get a brush, black brush at 100%, and just come in here and paint this out. And I might leave some of this gray on that tree there, but I'm going to paint all of this out. And it just depends on what you want affected. If you want this back here affected, then don't black it out. But we can actually, you can see a little bit of sky poking through this tree here. So I'm going to leave that the way it is. And what that's going to do is it's going to allow you to have a little bit of the effect that we're going to apply hit some of these grayer areas, but just a little bit. Most of it's going to be on the sky. And since you have it separated, it shouldn't affect any of the trees. Okay. So we're going to do an Alt click again to go back to our image. And now we'll go and bring this back down so we can see it. I'm going to go back to the curve, and you can see it's real steep because the only thing we have selected, and it's way over on the right, only thing we have selected is the sky. Nothing else is selected. So the way that I like to do this is to grab the little hand here, go up here to area that you want to darken down, and just bring it down like that. And then maybe even, yeah, that looks pretty good. Maybe a little bit more. And then some of the whiter areas, you can bring them up a little bit to get a good contrast in there. So that looks a lot better than it did. Now, one thing that I learned just the other day was that if you click here and just kind of bring that up so you have more of a curve there, it makes the gradation a lot better, less sharp. So now you can come in here and zoom in and look at this. It had no effect on the trees. So it looks really good separation there. So it's a great way to come in and just affect the sky. Okay, any questions on that? This is what we did last time. We worked on, maybe it was this image that we worked on, I don't remember. But we just did the sky last time. Now we're going to come in here.
Where did you say your actions were?
If you go to the iCloud account of mine, and the link is in the Facebook group to go to the iCloud account, where it has files, it says, starts out something like, here's some important links for you or something like that. And one of the links is to my YouTube channel with the videos, and the other link is to the iCloud account.
Okay, thanks.
Mm-hmm. And the action is inside the Luminosity folder, Luminosity Masking folder. But you could go, you could go online, and he's not the only one that does it. There are others out there that give you the action that does this as well. But he was the first one I ran across, and they work great. So that's the ones we're using. So let's say that we want to affect some other things. Let's say we've got this shadow area here, this shadow area over here that we want to lighten up. Now you could come in here. The way that I've always done it in the past before luminosity masking was just to come in here and create a curves layer and do this and then bring up the shadows. Okay, could do that. And then I would come in here and just paint it in right here. Right? So I'm in black. So you just kind of paint it in. Now that's way too much, but you got the idea. This is what I would do, and this is too hard of a brush. So, but that's kind of the way I would do it. And I might do it at 10% or something instead of 100%. But if you create a luminosity mask, it's going to have the different shades of gray in there so that you are affecting them based on their current luminosity. If you do it this way, you're brightening everything exactly the same. If you do it with a luminosity mask, you're affecting it by the gradation of those from white to black, all the different shades of gray. So that's the advantage of it. Now, sometimes you may not be able to tell the difference, very obviously. But to me, if you come over here and look for a channel that isolates these areas, and maybe down here in the darks, kind of isolate these areas here. So it's just kind of a hit and miss thing, but I kind of like the way this one works. Excuse me. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to command click to get the marching ants, and then I'm going to come back up here to RGB, get my layer back. I'm going to do another curves layer, and it's given me everything I had there. So now I'm going to do again an option click, and I'm going to decide, do I want to accept all of this? And I may I'm not ready to do any of this up here, so I'm going to paint this black. Whoops, I said black. So I'm just going to take, now I have a real soft brush, so I may want to change that just a little bit, maybe around 50%. And kind of take this out, because I really want to affect this area in here, and it's the white area that I'm affecting. Okay, so that all looks pretty good. So now I'm going to click here to bring it back, and now I can go to here and click on my little hand, and I'm going to brighten this up. So you see it's brightening that up there a little bit, and I got that from here, and I can click here maybe a little bit, and so you kind of got it a little bit brighter there. So if I take this and turn it on and off, it's just a touch, but it has brightened it. And if you don't like it as too much, you can just use the opacity, bring it down just a little bit. So that's kind of the approach. We go around here, and if I want to lighten this area up, or if I want to, you know, darken this area down. Sorry, my wife's going out the front door here, and our ring that's going off, so that's what's in the background. But oh, we got a package. So anyway, that's kind of the approach, and you just keep doing it, looking for areas that you want to adjust. So if, you know, if I wanted to darken this down, I would look for a channel out there that separates the area that I want to affect. And I don't always find it. Sometimes I have trouble with that, selecting it. So that's kind of my, and you don't have to use just curves. I mean, you could also, you know, I could come in here with the saturation, here in saturation, and I could copy this up to there. Now I have a hue and saturation mask, and I could come in here and boost the saturation a little bit if I wanted to, using the exact same mask. So it's for whatever purpose you need. So any questions on that? I mean, I'm gonna go to another image here and show you some more, but any questions on that?
Hey, Bob,
Yes.
how can you create that mask without using the action? Like if you wanted to just pull up and just have a channel where you only use the blue channel or the green channel, because I was playing with that today.
Right.
And when I go back, it goes away. It doesn't stay as a mask. So how does he create that mask layer?
So if you're going to, let's say you're going to use the green channel, all you do is you command click on the icon, it creates your marching ants. So you got your marching ants here, and you go back, I'm going to go back RGB, still got your marching ants. Anytime you create an adjustment layer of any kind, if you have a selection made, so I do an exposure layer, it creates the mask with those marching ants. Does that answer your question?
Yes, thanks.
Okay. Okay. So throw that away. So any more questions? I'm going to go do one more here, and I'm going to show you a little bit. I'm going to do the sky again first. And before I do that, let's go back to that one. And I'm just going to say delete luminosity mask just to show you what it does. Or delete channels, I mean. So it deleted all the channels. And now if you come over here, whoops, come over here, you can see it's not 1.7 gig anymore. You just really reduce the size of the image. So it's very important to do that. I just wanted to show you that. Okay. So back to this image. We're going to come in here. I think I can do this in 10 minutes. Create luminosity mask. Okay. This will move on here. I will. Okay, so now I have all these luminosity masks in here. I'm going to do the sky first. So let's look for one that really separates the sky. That does pretty good. We'll just use that one. So command click, click on your RGB to bring your color back. Layers. I'm going to do curves again. I'm going to take this and I'm going to bring the blue down. I'm going to bring this white up a little bit, give it a little bit of contrast. So that looks pretty good. Maybe this green down right there. Okay, so now you've got this curve over here and it's nice and curvy. So if I turn it off, you'll see that I brought in quite a bit of blue. Now, the next thing I want to do is I want to bring in, lighten up this bed, this truck bed. So I'm going to go over here and look for one that has that truck bed. So let's see, let's just look through here. Okay, this one's not too bad because it's separated. Even though it's not white, it is separated. So I'm going to take this, and I'm going to click here, get the marching ants, go to layers. Oops. No, whenever you don't click the RGB to bring it back to color, you get something like this. So this is a red flag for you that you need to go back and click on RGB to get your color back. So when I come back over here and I have, let's see, that's, okay, that's the other one. Okay, so I'm going to come in here and I'm going to go to curves again. And I created this channel or this mask. Now, instead of doing that, what I should have done is click here. I just want the bed here. So what I can do is I can use my other selection tools to help me get the bed. So there's a few ways that you can do that. I am going to come in here with, and we're going to talk about selections next time, at least I think we are. I'm going to come in here with the quick selection tool and I am going to try to select the bed. Okay, now that's not too bad. And if I come in here, I can get that to go away. Okay, a little bit right there. Okay, so now I've got the bed selected. I don't want any of this other stuff. So I can still use this tool to get rid of this. Okay, come on. Get rid of this. Okay, get rid of that. And I'm going to come down here and I'm going to get rid of all this. Okay, and I may just leave that. What the heck? Okay, so now I have this selected. Now, if you look over here, this is what I have. But if I come in here, and I shouldn't have done that. I'm going to do another one here. Curves. Oh, I've messed it up. Sorry, guys. I'm just going to start over. Channels. I think this was it. Yeah. So I'm going to select this and come up here. And now we're back to here. This is actually not the one I did earlier, but it'll still work fine. What you can do is come in here and I am going to deselect all of this stuff. Instead of selecting, I should have done it this way. Deselect all of this. Okay. And come on, deselect the tree here. Okay, pretty good. Deselect this. All right, so now I have the bed, and I have the bed selected. I can come over here and create my curves layer, and notice that if I shift click on that, or option click, that it's shades of gray. It's not just a white selection. So whenever I do my adjustment, it's going to affect it the same way it would if I just had it selected through the channel. So I hope this is all making sense. I'm gonna get rid of all of this. Whoops, wrong key, wrong thing. I want my brush here. And I'm just gonna paint this out. Okay, so now I come back here and I can select this I can bring that up and it's just affecting the bed. So notice how it's doing that. Then I can do even a vibrance, copy this up to there and take the vibrance up, something like that. So the point of all of that is that you can combine luminosity masking with other tools that you have. So there are even more things that you can do with other tools and luminosity masking. And that's what we'll talk about once we get through our selections and select and mask. And we'll continue with this because luminosity masking is very powerful, but it's not the answer to everything. So luminosity masking in conjunction with other things can really get you some nice stuff. So if we come in here and look at where we were when we started and where we are here, I've barely done anything, and I've improved the sky tremendously and improved the bed here tremendously as well. So if I continued on, I would probably lighten this tree a little bit, maybe lighten the shadows in here, and maybe even give it a little bit of a sharpening or some crunch or something to kind of make it look different. Probably apply a lookup table or a filter or something on it. So we did get here. We finished. Any questions on that, by the way? You're in the headlights?
Yes.
Yeah, I kind of went over that really, really fast. I was trying to get done by 9 o'clock, and I apologize. I should have gone over that much slower. And that's why I said that we will do more of this. Did you understand the part about the sky? I mean, the sky we did last time, it's pretty simple, you know, picking the right channel and then going in and just creating a selection from that.
Yeah, I had actually watched your YouTube luminosity thing today, so a lot of that looked a little familiar, but
Okay.
yeah, there's just so much to know.
Well, there is, and we're getting to the point, you know, we started out real slow and we're getting to the point where we're accelerating pretty well. So we'll continue with this, though. It's a you know, something that you can really improve your images if you know how to use it. And do things that if you have a blown out sky, that you can go in, as long as you have detail there, as long as there's information there, you can pull it back and do it in a way so that it's not obvious because you don't have little halos around the tree limbs here because you just painted it in. So it makes it a lot easier and more effective. So I'm going to try to do at the end of each one of these a little bonus thing. So I'm going to do something here that I hopefully will help you. It's called a saturation map. And basically what it does is it creates a map that shows you what is most saturated and what's least saturated. And with that map, you can create a mask so that you can raise and lower the saturation and saturate more the areas that are least saturated and saturate less the ones that are most saturated. So I hope that makes sense. So what I'm going to do here is with this image, I'll just create a stamp layer. I'm going to go to Filter, Other, HSB, HSL, and we're going to use RGB and HSB. Okay, and this stands for hue, saturation, and brightness. So I'm going to say OK. And we got this beautiful image here. With this image, what I can do is go over to channels. Oops, I should have deleted all of those. The way this works is red is hue, green is saturation, and blue is brightness. So what we're going to do is select green because this gives us the saturation map. And I'm going to do the same thing I do with channels. I'm going to come in here and click on it to get me the marching ants. I'm going to come back over here, and now I'm going to select hue and saturation. And I'm going to throw this away because I don't need it anymore. And then with this hue and saturation, I can raise the saturation and it's going to saturate the least saturated areas more and the most saturated areas less. Conversely, you can go the other way and desaturate the areas that are most saturated more and desaturated the least. So it gives you a little bit of control over saturation. So I don't know if this is something you can use, but it's something that I thought was kind of cool because it maps the saturation so you're more evenly. Instead of saturating this green a lot, saturating this green a lot, it's saturating everything in the image evenly, or not evenly, but in proportion to its current saturation. So I created a little action for this for me, and it creates this and brings it to, ends up with this at 100%, and then I just take the saturation down to something that I kind of like. So anyway, a little bonus for you. And that's in the video, will be in the video. So if you don't want it, that's okay. But it might come in handy. So any questions, any comments, any suggestions?
I just never found your iCloud. I don't even know where the link is. If you're talking on Zoom, there's a link, or if you're on Meetup, there's a link of iCloud.
No, it's in our Facebook group, in the Photoshop Learning.
Oh, okay, Facebook group.
Right.
Okay. Well, I'll go.
Yeah, it's in the announcements. If you click on announcements in the Photoshop Learning, then do,
Okay. Well, I'm looking all over this.
You'll see the link.
Trying to find some flipping link to iCloud. Like, I cannot find a link to iCloud. I'm totally blind.
Yeah, if you're a PC user, it's going to ask you, and if you don't have iCloud, it's going to ask you to download it. You're going to have an Apple ID and password. If you're a Mac user.
Oh, it's one of those drink the Kool-Aid things. Okay.
Right.
Yes, and Robin can explain to you, if you do not have any kind of an Apple ID, how you get there.
Oh, I've got an Apple ID from the
Yeah, I do too. Because Robin's like,
no,
well,
but I haven't used Apple in a long time.
yeah, Robin's like, well, how do you have it? I said, well, I have an iPad, which I love.
Yeah, I don't have anything Apple. Nothing.
Me either.
And I don't put anything Apple on my computers. So.
Well, that's why I put it on the laptop, because that's not my main computer. And if it blows up, it's not the end of the world.
It's not actually under announcements. It's in the main discussion section.
Oh,
Well, he's got it in announcements.
Yeah, I'll tell you how old it's been since I've had an Apple product on my computer. It was Windows 95.
Ari, spell that.
Well, that's why I told Bob the last time I put any I application on my computer, it completely screwed up my address book, and it was like months
Oh
to
my
get back.
God.
So.
Well, okay.
I'll go to Mercedes-Benz and look it up.
Okay.
Is that the way you spell his last name? Like Mercedes-Benz?
Yeah.
That's how you spell it. Yes.
Okay.
Thank you, Bob. Enjoyed it.
All right. You're welcome.
Well,
and
thanks
thanks for coming. And if there's anything else you want to talk about, be sure and let me know. Robin has let me know that she wants to do select and mask. And I think before we can do that,
Clipping mask.
Excuse me?
Clipping mask.
Oh, I thought you said select and mask.
Don't even know what that is.
Oh, okay. Well, then,
But do that too.
well, we have to learn how to select first, but we can do that. We can start with selections next time. And you wanted to talk about clipping masks. Yeah, we'll definitely do that too.
Yeah, I've been able to use them, but I cannot suss out, most of it. Yeah. Thank you.
Okay, well, we'll do that. And if there's anything else, let me know. And I guess I didn't screw up anything too bad in this session, so I'm pretty sure it's recording. So this will be posted on our YouTube channel probably tomorrow sometime. So it depends on how long it takes for them to get it.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank
Thank you all.
Thank you, Bob.
Good night.